But don't waste your breath calling out my name if you don't have nothing to say.
I live in Oakland. I'm on the other side of the bridge from here, and we've seen a lot of police brutality. I know you've seen some here in San Francisco. One question that I have is in terms of property damage and other kind of violent acts that have been done by certain, like either Black Bloc or some contingencies of the Occupy movement. I'm wondering if you can talk about your experiences with that, and also what you think that people in the movement can do about that.
I would love to just touch on this really quick because I do feel kind of strong about this. I don't believe we truly have a Black Bloc or any of those people represent what a Black Bloc was or is. It started with the idea of protecting protesters when cops would pull them and try to arrest them, and Black Bloc would pull them back from police and kind of surround them and be this force that allowed for democracy to happen. It wasn't totally started with violence and breaking windows and what it has been interpreted as now. So I'd like to be very careful of what we call that, and it's not necessarily Black Bloc because it can be a very positive thing, and there's been a very negative spin on that image.
Yeah, I think that's important. Maybe we should back up just a minute and talk about like what would you call that? Yeah, what would be like better words? Because we did struggle with like, you know, there is sort of a property destruction piece of it, but it seems like a small piece and a few people related to other things.
Well, yeah, like I was saying, the values behind that originally started with protecting protesters and that. I think people, what they got hooked on is what some people like to call it riot porn. And you know, you see all these riots and you get really amped up and you get juiced and you want to be a part of that. And you see these people dressed up in black and doing that. And it kind of gets people motivated to do that and have that mentality, which is fine. It's appropriate to have that, you know, militant approach and being organized and being that force and, you know, being recognized as in black. I think it's important to do the organizing, though, and not just be the sporadic people. Because a lot of young people I saw, you know, would want to run around and say, I'm more of an anarchist. No, I'm more of an anarchist. And I saw that in Oakland the night that they were breaking windows. And I was like, these are the people who are breaking windows right now? Like the childish people like arguing about who's more of an anarchist? So I thought it was funny. But
not to the person who owns the window.
Well, yeah, they were breaking the police station's windows, but
yeah.
I think we have to name something else. For me, I know it may be some confused people. I saw some people that didn't really know how to totally get involved, and that was their one outlet. And like he was saying before, that's disenfranchised people who are looking for an outlet and don't totally know. And that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, we did. Democracy for America had a national conference call with people from the Occupy movement all over the country. And one of the things that they talked about was this sense that like when people show up, they don't know what to do exactly. It's not like there's a welcoming committee and like a, you know, sometimes there is, but sometimes there's not, right? So one of the things that we did was have this conference call where people could call in and hear about, okay, like when you get to the camp, you know, go find somebody that, you know, looks like they're doing something interesting, talk to them, you know, be part of the General Assembly. And I think a lot of folks just, they want to be part of it and they see other people or, you know, throwing a bottle or whatever. Like you had something, and then Ben too. It looks like everybody's got it.
So I would just like to say, you know, people who participate in autonomous actions that aren't consented upon by the group, who take these things into their own hands, that's kind of fascism. It's taking away our collective voice. For example, on January 20th, I organized the Liberate the Commons action with a couple of my fellow organizers, and a window was broken after police had pepper sprayed people. It was sort of a retaliation, right? And we had consented to nonviolence and no property destruction, right? I think it's really important to note that those responses are emotional and they're ego-based. It's a quick fix for something you're feeling that you don't know how to organize. Now, it's our job as organizers to create a space or do a better job of creating a space where we minimize the risks of property destruction, right? So we take responsibility for that happening. I think we have to. On the note of property destruction, there is a level of property destruction that I'm willing to accept as long as it's strategic. I think breaking into a building, for example, to liberate the commons, this action at Cathedral Hill to highlight the homeless issue, to highlight the greed of the 1%, that strategic property destruction, people aren't upset about that. People are upset about the emotional response, right? For example, if there was a nuclear power plant being built and you were trying to stop it and the fence was closing off and you wanted to chain yourself to that power plant entrance where they would do work, is it okay to cut that fence and get in? Of course it is. There's a level of property destruction that's strategic that is important to acknowledge. And it's, here in San Francisco, emotional property destruction doesn't go over well at all. I'm cool with that, like there's a time and a place for every strategy. This may be not the place for that strategy, but I think it's important to not immediately have a knee-jerk response to something you see and say, oh, it's violent, oh, it's bad, oh, it's negative. Again, the emotional response is what I'm concerned with, and I want to make sure that people who feel like the only way to participate in this movement is through irrational, emotional action, I want them to be enfranchised. I want them to participate in a way where they do start to respect consensus. They do start to respect the will of the community around them, San Francisco not liking property destruction. Like, there's a level of respect that you have to have for the community you're organizing it. So my hope for them is that they become enfranchised and learn the process and want to participate in the process. And I think we can do that if we don't alienate them as Black Bloc. We have to keep them as people who don't have the right outlet. Don't just call them emotional kids, for example.
Ben was up, and then we'll do Robin.
So if I had to only answer one question, I would definitely answer this one, because I have a very strong opinion about. And what's interesting is that the Black Bloc is not actually a group, it's a protest tactic that anybody can use. And I like certain parts of it, like unarresting people non-violently. I think that's great. But in terms of, and I completely agree with Craig, like if there is a train full of weapons that's going to go, a train car that's going to go to the docks, destroying the tracks, I would not be against that to stop that weapon shipment. In terms of breaking windows, I think that the people who do that, if they're not getting paid by the FBI, they should be, because they're doing their work for them. And I really despise the people who do that, because they kind of take over the entire message of the march. And there's such a small group of people too. I really do feel it's kind of like fascism. These people who, and it'd be one thing if they had their own march, but they never do. They always hide in numbers, somebody else's peaceful march. And I truly think they are cowards, the people who do that. And I really don't like it. I think that we need to have monitors to stop them from doing that. In Oakland, I saw that a lot. I saw a lot of good people, especially people from SEIU, stopping people from doing that. And I don't want to alienate these people. I want to talk to them and I want to get to know who they are. But I think that if they're not Asian provocateurs, they're definitely misguided.
Yeah, I was looking at the news after the Oakland situation, and the comments are running 90% negative.
Yep.
I think it gets really negative publicity in the press, and that's what they latch onto. And then it's very easy for them to say, well, that's what the Occupy movement's doing. But the Occupy movement is a lot bigger than that, and actually a lot more peaceful than that. But I wanted to say I'm a member of the Occupy Be the Change caucus. And Wade Hudson started that because he was at Occupy SF hearing people say be the change, and he likes nonviolence. So he wrote up a nonviolence pledge, which I actually brought tonight. And half the people in the group, we meet at the Quaker Center on Mondays, sometimes on Mondays, are nonviolence trainers. And they did the nonviolence training prior to the January 20th action. They also do 2- and 3-day trainings on nonviolence. And many of them went over to the Oakland meeting. I don't know if you remember, there was one night where we were meeting at the Commonwealth Club, and they were meeting in Oakland. There were about 4 meetings that night. One of them was in Oakland on diversity of tactics. And they came back to our meeting, and they were shaking their heads. They were just saying, we're not far enough with this issue yet. They said there's quite a division right now between people who are not committing violence and those who are outside. And I just wanted to put out to you that they did not see it resolved at this point, and that they felt that there needs to be a lot more work done with people that feel a need to act out on in the ways that they were. And of course, you know, back in, I think it was maybe late 80s or early 90s when there was a bad thing that happened out at the Concord Naval Weapons Station. I think it was when Brian Wilson got his legs run over. I mean, they were blocking the trains. Yeah, they were blocking the trains for the weapons. Well, guess what? 10,000 of us went out 4 days later and pulled up those tracks. So that just kind of points out to you, it's not, I agree with what you were saying, if it was both emotional and strategic. It needed to be done. But, you know, let's put some thought into something and not just have a knee-jerk reaction. So my feeling from what the nonviolence trainers are saying is there needs to be a lot more dialogue with people who want to act out like that, a lot more discussion with them so that they can plug in a way that they feel that they don't have to go, you know, just lashing out.
Have you guys seen anything changing here in San Francisco as a result of some of the things that happened in Oakland? I'm asking about the flag burning, taking over of the city hall. Have you guys seen any fallout here from that?
I would say Occupy SF has always had a really strong commitment to nonviolence and against property destruction. And so I think what it's done is strengthen our commitment to nonviolence. I mean, don't get me wrong, the police are violent. They're ridiculously violent. I was at a march on November 16th with a bunch of students and saw a crowd of riot cops march through a crowd, hit my pregnant friend who was visibly pregnant, and then hit me in the stomach 7 times when I chased him into the crowd and said, "You don't hit people, you don't hit people," you know? And I saw him pick up a friend and throw her on the ground. I saw him smush a kid's face into glass, you know? Like, I saw these things happen. The police are violent. And I believe that not responding to that violence with violence is, or with not responding to that violence with violence is an effective strategy. It's hard for me to tell people not to defend themselves. I believe it's powerful, I believe it's strategic, I think it's smart, I think it gives us the moral high ground, which we need in these struggles. I think, you know, we need that. But it's hard, especially when you see a cop hit a pregnant woman.
Was she all right?
She just had her baby like 2 weeks ago. The baby's fine. She's great. So, but it's, you know, it's the fact that it happened.
But that takes a lot of training. That's what Martin Luther King did with people, you know, who marched. They had to train them.
It's true.
Not to respond to it.
It's true, and this is a thing that I think people need to remember. At the time, Occupy was not even 2 months old.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of new activists being called out. Like I said, I've been an activist for 16 years. I know how to deal with these things. Not everyone does. And the nonviolent direct action training that happened around January 20th was remarkable. There was a lot of people that participated in it who really needed it. So anyway, so I think we've just reaffirmed our commitment to nonviolence here.
Actually, I mean, I want to take a step back with your original question about the question around property damage, because there's property damage and there's property damage. I mean, I'm saying it like that because I'm going to preface it with, or if I'm going to lead into, on the same day that Occupy Cal was raided by hundreds of cops, that same day at Penn State, there was the riots and Sandusky. It's a question of like, why is the Occupy movement being highlighted and like countered against property destruction when different elements that are protesting around a football coach that was sexually assaulted gets a different type of rhetoric. I think we have to start from that point. Because then it's like, okay, the powers that be, the 1%, the people that control the mainstream media, know what type of power the Occupy movement has and wants to counter against that because they want to maintain the status quo. So there's property destruction and then there's property destruction. And just to say that, it wasn't just minor property destruction during the Sandusky riots. It was like $20,000 worth of property damage. And I just want to highlight that because, like, when people act out in anger around smashing a window against the banks, it's out of frustration because they've lived under, especially in Oakland, the most, like it's mostly a people of color, you know, mostly black people, like neighborhood. Like you can't find a supermarket there, you know, people that probably has a high foreclosure rate. Like people are constantly living under the poverty line. So to me, it's like, of course there's no outlet, because the only outlet that they know is the system has been smashing against them. And that's also what the Occupy movement highlights, which is like there's hope for them to get involved in a different way. I think it's always a question about strategy and tactics, about how you go against that. But first and foremost, like what's going to prevent property destruction or actually make people or like build a nonviolent movement is we need those numbers. We need mass mobilizations. We need people in the street, people like you, like coming out into the Occupy movement and actually organizing with us and building those mass mobilizations.